I'm Madison Shakespeare, a Gadigal traditional owner, saltwater woman from the east coast of Australia. We respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners, elders and ancestral spirits of the sacred First Nations across which we travelled to create this yarning about connecting with refugee peoples in Australia through caring for country. As a First Nations person, having the chance to yarn with refugee peoples about their life experiences is an opportunity to exchange stories and build beneficial cultural relationships through mutual understanding. Researchers from this project provide insight on ways through which connecting communities through custodianship of country can develop meaningful relationships between First Nations and refugee peoples in Australia.
My name is Tyler McMahon and I lead research at SSI. SSI and Western Sydney University have for the past 3 years conducted research looking at refugees' sense of belonging as they start a new chapter of their lives in Australia. In this latest phase of Foundations for Belonging research, we're addressing a research gap, looking at refugees' understanding and engagement with First Nations histories and issues. From the start, we wanted this research to be First Nations led, and we were privileged to have Madison Shakespeare from Western Sydney University taking on that role in the research team. Under Madison's guidance, we blended First Nations knowledges and Western approaches to research. Country, in the Aboriginal sense of that word, is central to the way First Nations people look at experience and look at culture. And yarning, a traditional way of having conversations in First Nations communities in Australia, was also important.
Yarning with refugee peoples involves sharing stories that illuminate strength, tenacity and resilience of peoples who are unable to live on their homeland. Many Australian First Nations peoples continue to be dispossessed from their home nation country. This means that we are separated from family and community and unable to fulfil our cultural and spiritual obligations that focus on caring for country.
The research held 6 Yarn Country workshops in sites chosen by Madison across what is now called Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. These First Nations-led workshops introduced refugee participants to the local ecology and to country, and they had a chance to ask questions about First Nations' relationship to country, as well as sharing their own experiences on their homelands and their cultures.
Hi, I'm Bhavya. I'm from India and I'm doing my PhD at the Institute of Culture and Society, Western Sydney University. I have been in Australia since 2019 and my PhD research is with Indigenous single women farmers in India. I was raised in Delhi, so I did not know a lot about Indigenous culture in India itself. But when I was doing my master's research, I started living with this community. They're called Kond Adivasis in India. And there it was a complete turn of life events for me because it was a very different culture. It was a village setting that I was living in, so it was a very different perspective to life. So the project is heavily influenced by Indigenous knowledge systems and practices and communitarian value systems and things like that. And since I've been in Australia, I've also been particularly very, very interested in the Aboriginal culture here and the community here because I find so many resonances, even though these are different countries per se, but the ethical value systems, the connection to country, land, food practices, a lot of things are very similar.
Being on country together, caring for our natural environment, is caring for each other now and for generations of future Australians. Learning about why and how First Nations peoples of Australia care for country is a way through which we can all connect with country.
My name is Sukhmani Khurana. I'm a researcher and teacher based at the University of New South Wales. I've lived in many cities across Australia and I have a really long-standing interest in Indigenous communities and issues, and also in refugee communities and how they're represented in the media and more broadly in storytelling. So this project is a really unique and fantastic opportunity to bring my two interests together. I think it's really important for migrants and refugees in this country to understand the land they're on, the fact that they're complicit in colonization, and to be part of the journey by showing solidarity in meaningful ways. They also want to know more about the land they're on, how they can participate in society, which means not just voting in elections, but also understanding what the history of the place is, what the history of colonization is. And in the case of many refugees, there is also shared struggles because they themselves have been displaced from the lands that they come from.
The research found that refugees have limited opportunities, but a strong desire to learn more about First Nations histories and issues, particularly at the local level. In particular, refugees wanted to know more about First Nations histories and cultures through place-based education and the opportunity for cultural exchange with local Aboriginal people. Refugees reported a deepening sense of belonging arising from a shared sense of suffering and cultural vulnerability, a valuing of cultural diversity, and a mutual respect for land.
So there's many points of connection that Indigenous peoples and refugee people can connect with and connect on, and hopefully build on more solidarity and movements that can help change the face of this country.